As global temperatures continue to rise, cities around the world are facing more frequent and intense heat waves. It's no longer the question whether they need to adapt, but how. I'm now joined by Anaclaudia Rossbach, Executive Director of UN Habitat, the Human Settlement Program of the United Nations. Welcome.
Thank you, Tim.
Ms. Rossbach, in recent weeks, Europe has seen extreme heat, emergency measures, and more than 1,300 reported excess deaths linked to heat since 21st June. Why are urban spaces at the center of the global heat crisis?
Yeah, indeed. And I had the opportunity, because I have been in Europe in the last weeks, to experience it by myself, right? And it is affecting, citizens not only here, but all over the globe. And if we zoom into, for example, informal settlements, you see a huge difference of temperature. You can't believe Rio de Janeiro, for example, in São Paulo, people living, Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, people living in informal settlements, they can experience difference of even 8 degrees of temperature compared to people living, in the rest of the cities. But I think this is, from one side, the climate change. The climate is changing, and temperatures are reaching, levels that we haven't expected, and cities, they haven't been built for that, right? And now we have to rethink the way we live in our cities, the way we use our buildings, and this will have a tremendous impact.
Why are cities so much warmer than the countryside around it?
Well, because of the built environment, of course, and we have cement. You have cement all over, you have less green. In the countryside it's different, and you have the buildings, and sometimes the way cities are planned and designed, they also impede the ventilation, right? So you have many factors that haven't been really incorporated when we planned our cities. I think now the climate change is bringing a different awareness to planners, to the society, and we have different thinking today. But in the past, we didn't. So we built this kind of islands, right? Literally islands of heat today.
As you were mentioning awareness, heat often receives political attention when temperatures peak, as we've seen in recent weeks, at least in Europe. But once weather cools down, the urgency tends to fade. From your perspective, are you observing that cities are moving from emergency response to long-term heat preparedness fast enough?
Well, not fast enough, I would say, unfortunately. But also the degrees of uncertainties, they are so high at this point in time. But I do meet, many mayors and networks of mayors that are understanding this is kind of a permanent situation, and they have to address, they have to develop. Yes, I do meet many mayors, many local governments, local authorities that are concerned. They are exchanging practices and looking at, what are the solutions, but what are the policies, what are the regulations, what are the laws that need to be changed.
What does a serious urban heat plan and the turnaround of it, the realization of it, include beyond warning people to drink enough water or stay indoors when it comes to heat waves?
Yeah, increasing the green spaces in cities, the public green spaces in cities, to have more, access to water in cities, to clean water. The water streams in cities, they can play a huge difference, but you can also play around traffic, working hours, regulations that minimize, the peak hours, people being outside. I think there are many measures that you can take, but I believe if you really want to go into the core and the root cause, you really need to embed into the urban planning, the way you plan, and the building codes, the way you build in the cities. And there we have a couple of examples, right? You have a city like Bogota that reviewed their whole master plan perhaps 3 years ago, and they kept the surrounding green area as untouchable. And they preserved an area where most of the population lives. So if you look at the area of Bogota, the ratio is 70% of the territory is preserved as green, and 30% can be used, but then 70% of the population live in this small territory, which implies in having eventually more densification, right? So, but the decision there was to preserve the surroundings, minimizing city expansion, urban expansion, protecting biodiversity, you know, through very solid zoning mechanisms, planning mechanisms is really, really important.
For people living, you mentioned it before, living in informal settlements or poorly insulated housing, for example, staying indoors can be even dangerous.
Yeah.
These people don't have the means to buy air conditioning, to make a renovation, to move somewhere else. What can cities realistically or can and have to do for them?
I think the first thing is recognize they are there, and map, count, to make sure that they can embed these territories into the public policy. This is the first step. The second step is make sure that they have access to the basic. And what are the basic issues that you need? You need water. You need waste management. These are all, you know, things that if you don't manage well, then you expose people to the climate impacts, even to heat waves. Imagine living into a dump area, next to a dump area, how it affects, right, your quality of life. So connecting water, making sure, you know, there's waste collection. The access to services is very important. You can do that. You can do that through the recognition of the right of these households to stay there. And there are many countries, they have embedded that in their national laws, right? Also many planning mechanisms that have been developed. For example, in Kenya, there is a zoning mechanism called a special planning area. So slums, informal settlements that are recognized as a special planning area, they can be connected to services, to utilities, and have access to the basics. So having a kind of a master plan is very important. And at the bottom is working with the communities, talking to them.
You mentioned it, that many mayors know what to do.
Yeah.
They know, they have that on their radar. Still, you also said we're not acting fast enough. Yeah. What are the biggest bottlenecks from your experience? Funding? Is it governments? Is it policy, knowledge? All of them?
Yeah. Well, I think we do have the know-how. Having the society to accept what are the measures that needs to be taken. This kind of the social contract, I think this is one of the most difficult things to achieve these days.
If we look beyond heat to floods, water scarcity, waste, traffic, rapidly growing cities, do we need to rethink the basic model of urban life?
Yeah, totally.
And if so, how would that city look like? Maybe for a person who's not rich.
Yeah.
A just, fair, future-thinking, sustainable city.
Yeah, certainly there is a reshift that we need to do. I think, first of all, we have to ask the young people, because they will have, you know, the aspirations, the ideas that we need to feed into our work. But if you look at the regions that have a considerable built environment, there's a lot in terms of how we use this built environment, how we recycle, how we transform, how we reinvent, right? I just came from a lecture at the university and with architects here in Germany, and they were discussing, look, we have enough built, but there's a lot that we can transform. That's right, but it requires a shift on how we perceive the city, how we use the city, how we live, right? I don't see us living in the future like our grandparents or great-grandparents did, because we just cannot afford. We cannot afford this amount of land consumption that we had in the past. We have to be very conscious about the way we use land, the way we oppress the water resources, all these root causes of everything that we're discussing right now. But then if you look at the Global South, we still need to build a lot. Look, we are going to have, in the next 20 years, 2 billion people coming to cities in Africa and Southeast Asia. We don't have the built environment for them, so we still need to build. But, you know, the shift, our mental shift on how a city looks like cannot be the same as here. It will be different, right? We have to build incrementally. We can have to build, in a way that fits to the local context, to the local culture. So we have to combine the ideal with the possible and have a lot of incrementalism to get there.
When you look at cities that are doing it right, you mentioned some aspects here now, but what are they doing differently?
So the former mayor of Paris, for example, she was looking at empty, vacant spaces, buildings in the city of Paris, to use as housing. And she expanded the supply of housing using old public buildings that were empty, vacant, recycling, not without having some resistance, right? Because why you put social, affordable housing in a well-located place, right? But these are the kinds of measures we cannot expand. We don't have to build if we already have something built, right? So let's maximize what we have. But for doing that, you need to consult. You need to create a space and to have a dialogue with the society, right? Informal settlements. You cannot work in an informal settlement if you don't liaise with the people living in informal settlements. At the Queenie, South Africa, Durban, they have consistently implemented slum upgrading, slum integration, connecting the water to the slums. But they do that in partnership with the communities. In partnership with the communities, they go and make the mapping, they discuss what are the priorities. And sometimes, more local you go, better you have access to the solution. So you go outside to have the ideas, the trends, the examples, but then you find the solutions inside. So which land is vacant, which building is underutilized. The local community will be able to inform you.
What makes you confident with all the volatility, as you mentioned it, or as you called it, that cities can and will adapt to an accelerating climate crisis?
Yeah. We found out that more than 80% countries reported that they are taking some action in cities to deal with climate change. And that's very positive because we know that cities are responsible for 70% of the emissions. So there is already some recognition of the importance of cities, the importance of local action. What gives me a lot of hope is that, especially when I travel around everywhere, I see there is thinking and I see there is innovation happening. Perhaps not yet at the pace that we wish, but there is. And this gives me a lot of hope. Even at UN Habitat, when we agreed, when member states agreed last year that UN Habitat for the next years until 29 will focus on access to housing, on access to land and basic services, 105 member states agreed. Having this agreement and a consensus that housing is a common good and everybody has the right to access adequate housing, it's amazing, it's good. In a moment where we're so polarized, to have this consensus, it's good. So we're still finding spaces of consensus.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.